everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I'm the lead learner at the Center for Educator Wellness and Learning, a center that was created by the South Carolina Education Association. And it is my honor and pleasure to bring you tonight's presenter, TJ Rumler. TJ and I met a few years ago at an educator retreat up in Old Fort, North Carolina. And I remember meeting him there, and I think at the time you were reading "The Body Keeps the Score" by Bessel van der Kolk, maybe you had recently read it.
That might have been like my second time through it, probably.
Yeah, and I remember it was dog-eared, and it had a lot of like highlights and notes and things in it. And I just remember being so impressed with TJ, having conversations with him, and since then, he and I have been keeping up because we both have a shared interest in trying to improve the inner lives of educators and students, and really working on mental health issues and just kind of creating peace in our schools. And I've just been so impressed with the work that he does. And I've seen him present a couple of times. And when we started this center, he was one of the first people I reached out to because he's just a remarkable presenter with a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, and somebody who's always thirsty to learn more. And that's the kind of thing that I feel like we need in this time. We need people who are curious and willing to share what it is they're learning. So, TJ, how are you doing tonight?
I am doing great. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah. So it's I just saw that you were coming to the retreat again this summer. So I assume that you had a good experience at the first one.
Had a great experience. I thought it was. I've been a practitioner of meditation and mindfulness for several years, but to me, typically it's a solo practice, and so that was a great opportunity for me to take just a couple of days to not just practice but connect with other people who are doing the work, and kind of in the arena, if you will. And it was great. I look forward to coming again.
Yeah, it's going to be great to catch back up with you, have more time to actually spend together, to have some deeper conversations about what's been going on in your world and your orbit over the past couple of years. So tonight you're going to be talking about building resilience, and I know that you're one of the things that I think you and I both have experienced over the past couple of years in talking about teacher self-care and talking about resilience and talking about mindfulness. There's been a little bit of this pushback, like, hey, if we just had the time to do it, we would do it, and stop telling me I need to take care of myself. I know I need to take care of myself, and I know I need to be resilient. And I think there's been some kind of misconceptions and misunderstandings that have taken place there, but also some understandable frustrations because Absolutely. Of the way things have been. The way things have been put on teachers and the way it's been articulated to teachers. So I'm looking forward to how you're going to present this tonight and share with our educators. And I'm just going to turn everything over to you at this point, and just thank you for being here.
Thank you. Let's see. Let me get this loaded up. All right, we good to go?
Yes.
I'm excited to talk about resilience, and I think it's something that is traditionally misunderstood. That's the reason I don't know if, and I'm not going to share any spoilers, but if anybody watches the show Ozark, this is one of the main characters in that show. And I think if you asked 100 people who watch that show, some might say that she's resilient, and some may not. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But to kind of, before I get started, I want to talk a little bit about what you just mentioned with the self-care, the pushback. I do think it's important to acknowledge that that's a very imperfect conversation. My friend and colleague Chris Haynes, he used a really good illustration, because if you're like me, if you're anybody who's ever talked about self-care, you use that metaphor, that analogy of the oxygen mask coming down from the top of the airplane if you hit turbulence. And that is true. It is important. We do have to put on our own oxygen mask, and we're going to talk about that tonight a little bit too. But I love how he says that entire system, that entire metaphor is predicated upon some system dropping me an oxygen mask. And a lot of us just are still waiting on that. So while I want to really acknowledge that that is something that is a real thing, that a lot of us just haven't received that oxygen mask, it is also important to really look in the mirror and do what we can and give ourselves grace and understand that this is a really imperfect situation that we're going through. Todd told you a little bit about our personal connection. That's always my favorite bio to hear is relationally. But as far as just kind of telling you that I am qualified to give this talk, which is important. You're using an hour of your life. You could be anywhere right now. I'm a clinical social worker licensed here in South Carolina. I work full-time for schools, and I also own a consulting business outside of there. And I do private practice therapy as well. I'm also a TEDx speaker. If you're interested in more of the work I do, one of the most proud things I've ever done was a TEDx talk, and we talked about the dangers of exclusionary discipline and like some alternatives to suspension. So you just type in TJ TEDx and you should be able to find that. I'm also an Army combat veteran, and I'll probably get into a little bit about that because of the nature of this talk tonight. I know educators love Twitter, so if you want to live tweet or follow me or connect on there, I just love sharing ideas. That's my Twitter handle. And now as we get started, and I kind of stole this idea from Resma Menakem, one of my favorite authors. He wrote My Grandmother's Hands. If you haven't read it, check it out. But he uses the concept of grounding truths, because everything we talk about, especially when it's just me talking to you, we don't have the opportunity for this to be conversational, which I love. I'd like to just throw some things out there that I believe are true in this conversation. Number one, resilience, even though that's the title of this topic, of this presentation, it's seriously overrated. I've seen a lot of educators, nurses, just helping professionals talk about the concept of I'm really tired of being resilient. And a lot of times we use resilience in a harmful way. Some of us, I'm probably guilty of it, of talking about how resilient children are, but we use that almost as an excuse to cover up for the bad things that are happening to them. Sometimes the bad things that our systems, that our communities, that our schools are doing to them. So systems are important. One of my favorite quotes, systems create outcomes, the outcomes that they are specifically designed to create, to have. If we don't continue to look at both, one of the books I'm reading right now in the opening credits, it says, it's funny how schools are really hungry, really thirsty, as Todd said, for trauma-informed training, but we are not as interested all the times as at removing the things that create the trauma. So we have to acknowledge that systems are creating students and children that have to be resilient, teachers that have to be resilient. And so we need to understand that both of those can be true. And then also, we've been through a lot. As educators, this has probably been the hardest year that we've collectively been through. I know personally, it's been the hardest year that I've been through. So as we talk about some of these things, I want to invite you to take what works for you, leave what doesn't, but give yourself grace. The last thing I want to do is introduce a concept or an idea and you to walk away feeling shame if it's not something you've been doing. So I hope that you'll take something with you tonight as we talk about resilience that can add hope. And as I wore this shirt on purpose tonight, trying to be a hope dealer, that you can take something with you that you can work with. Now, a lot of us believe that resilience is this inherent quality that people are either born with or they're born without. And I'm here to present the idea that that is not necessarily true. Resilience can absolutely 100% be cultivated. Now, one thing you'll notice about, if you've never heard me present, I throw a lot of resources out there because, as my hat says, it says we, period. I believe that we, not I, not just Todd, not just you, but we all do this work together. So I want to throw anything out there that I think will make you a better educator, a better human being. So this book right here at the bottom, it's one of my favorite books that I've ever read. It's called What Happened to You by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry, who is one of my professional heroes. And in that book, they talk about the concept of resilience. But as you can see here on the left of your screen, how it's not always resilience that we're really talking about when we describe people who have been through a lot. I'm not going to read that entire quote to you on the right, but I am going to read that part in the black. And it says that predictable, moderate, and controllable activation of the stress response system can lead to a stronger and more flexible stress response capability, i.e. resilience. And we're going to talk in just a minute about what that can look like. But over here on the left, if you notice that if people go through hard things, but not in the right way, that can lead to extreme vulnerability, where if we do it in the right way, with the correct dosage, with the correct supports surrounding that person, it can really result in resilience. So I'll use a personal example. Told you I was a veteran, and I usually don't talk about that, but I thought it fit tonight. This is me several years ago. This was like 2001. I joined right after 9/11 in September of 2001. And these are pictures from basic training. Now, if you're a veteran, thank you for your service. I appreciate it. If you're not, if maybe you've heard stories of basic training, but it's pretty grueling, but it's predictable. You know what time you're going to get up. You know you're going to be pushed to the limits of everything that you can give. At that time in my life, basic training was easily the most strenuous and difficult physical and emotional process that I had ever gone through. But at the same time, never did I feel like I wasn't supported. I was supported by our drill instructors. They beat us down, but they built us up. I was supported by my fellow, soldiers that were coming through, my fellow recruits that were coming through basic training with me. Some of these guys down here right now, I wonder where they are, but I remember my interactions with them, because where one of us was weak, the others may be strong, and we would build each other up. And at the end of that process, at the end of that basic training, I had gone through so much hardship, but I left thinking I could do anything in the world. Now, fast forward a few years, in April of 2003, with my unit, the 151st Signal Brigade, we deployed to Baghdad. I was there for around a year, April to April, so almost exactly a year. And these are some photos from there. And the stress response activation that I experienced, that we experienced, while in combat, was extremely different than my experience in basic training. The bunker, the picture you see on the bottom right, there were many days, and I was in a place called Log Bay Sites. In 2003, 2004, it was one of the most attacked areas in Baghdad. So we would be sitting and just doing our job, whatever, and then you would just hear mortars. And the mortar is it's a very imperfect, inaccurate bomb that you can launch over a wall. And so they would just start coming over, and all we had to do, the only thing in our arsenal at the point, was to get in this bunker and hide and wait. These attacks were very unpredictable. They were very extreme, and they were prolonged in two ways. Because one, in that acute situation, we didn't know how long we were going to be waiting. We didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And then that was stretched out over a year. And we have men and women that are coming back from combat a lot of times that have experienced this unpredictable, extreme, prolonged stress activation, and it results in sensitization, vulnerability. It results in trauma. So I hope that explains a little bit about how we can play a part in helping students, helping kids do hard things, but learn they can do hard things with supports built in. Now, I love this model from Master. I've recently learned about this model, but it's the different models for engaging positive change. And you can see on the left, there's three. And the top one is where she talks about really to build resilience, to help people, to help folk. We remove the barriers that are causing the trauma, that are causing the adversity. And the second one would be on the flip side. Let's not worry about removing the hard thing. Let's worry about building up the good things. And what we want to try to do is that third one, where we do both. We want to work in prevention and mitigation, but we also want to build up where we can build up, while at the same time understanding that involved in all that are these systems that we mentioned in the beginning. Pardon me. So a lot of you on this call have probably heard of the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. This is where I would normally, raise your hand if you have. But I would venture to say, if you're here on this call, you have. What you may have not heard is research called benevolent childhood experiences. It doesn't roll off the tongue like ACEs. But there's been a few peer-reviewed papers on benevolent childhood experiences. And what the authors and the researchers have done is similar to the ACEs study. They came up with a 10-question survey. And so they asked the people in these studies, did this happen to you when you were a child? Did you have X, Y, Z? They were all positive things. And similar to the ACEs study, this had a dose-response relationship. So the higher the score, the higher the outcomes. And the outcomes in this situation is the higher benevolent childhood experiences that happened to these individuals, the lower, I guess it's an inverse relationship, but the lower the rates of PTSD symptoms. More good things, more resilience in the face of adversity. So they may have gone through what we would call a potentially traumatic situation, but maybe they didn't have the long-lasting symptoms that would be clinically diagnosable as PTSD. Number one, did you like school? We're gonna use maybe two of these questions. Really wish I could see the chat, and I want to tell you all this too because I forgot to mention it at the beginning. Todd has 100% permission from me to interject. So if you're throwing comments in there, I know we're in the chat. I know we're going to be looking at them. We may have some time for Q&A, but if there's one that's really pressing, we can interrupt and field that question. So if you think back to, did you like school? I loved high school. But that's a question that's really valid if we ask our students. I want you to really ground with me in something. None of us have to go to school tomorrow. None of us will get in trouble with South Carolina Department of Corrections if we don't show up at school tomorrow. We could lose our job, we could lose our paycheck, but we could find somewhere to work. Students, and I used to be a truancy officer way back in the day, students can go to jail. They are mandated by the state of South Carolina until they're 17. So really, if you think about it, the onus is on us. We should take a customer service approach to creating an environment where they like it. I don't think that's too much to ask. One of the things I always say, if we did kid things or adult things the way we do kid things, would we enjoy it? Like if Todd and I put on a conference and we did it the way school is, would we like it? I don't always know the answer to that. One student who is, and I'm not going to say his name, but he's really close to me in my life. He's 14. He'll be a sophomore next year. And I asked him that question just recently. And his answer was like, no, man, but I mean, who really does? And that shocked me because I did like school when I was his age. And my question was like, what are some things that we could do differently? And his first answer was, well, I mean, I would love some time at lunch because by the time I get through line, I have maybe 5 or 10 minutes to eat with my friends. Another thing is class change. I know a lot of schools that have as little as 3 minutes for kids to change class. Now, what if you came to an all-day PD, we gave you 10 minutes to eat and 3 minutes between sessions? We don't have to be PhDs to understand that that's just not likable. On top of that, it doesn't make sense neurologically. Our brains need time to pause, to rest, to process information, to integrate information. Going from one thing to the next like that, we're treating them like they're robots. So simply creating an environment where school is fun and enjoyable is a benevolent childhood experience that can lead to resilience. Next, and think back in your own life. Not your parents, not your caregivers. Was there an adult who could provide you with support and advice? I want you to think about it. Get that one person in your mind. Now, I have a challenge for you. And I want you to put this in chat because I want to go back and read your answers. They're always interesting. With one word, if you had to describe that person to me in one word, what would it be? Some of the answers that I hear on a regular basis when I do this question: caring, consistent, empathetic, tough, relational. I hear empathetic a lot. I hear sometimes people will cheat and they push me. Sometimes people just can't fit in, they can't use the one word. But I hear a lot of those. Never, and I'll go back and look at the chat, so maybe you're going to prove me wrong tonight. Never have I heard anything that made me think of how good of a teacher you were, how good of a therapist you were. I've never heard anything like they really helped me pass the SAT. Like, I've never heard anything like that. And it reminds me of this quote from an author, Jamie Wright, who the book that I found this in was The Very Worst Missionary, and she talks about her journey into service work. But I love it, and I have the photo on purpose on this one, because how many of you have worked in a school where one of the employees that has the absolute best relationships with the students, the absolute most trust, had no letters behind their name, no alphabet soup going on there, because they know they care. And I know a lot of you know that, but I think sometimes it's easy to just get caught up in the rat race with all of the requirements, all the pressures that come down on you, especially those of you who are classroom teachers. But I want you to ground into this quote and just remember that at the end of the day, these students may or may not go to college. We can't control everything that they do, but you can control how you make them feel. And being able to pour into those kids like that, you are building their capacity. You are helping them either form or maintain a stronger, secure attachment that will help them navigate the world and take risks and ultimately have a better shot at being resilient human beings. So we all come here for strategies. I know you want strategies. I've just been talking so far, so I'm going to give you a few. And number one, the one that everybody, I know there's some eyes rolling, but you have to take care of you. Whatever that means for you. Being vulnerable today, that meant I had to go to the gym between a board meeting and here. In the few minutes I had, I wanted to take a nap, but I needed to get those juices flowing. So whatever that means for you, and I'll tell you why. If I can't hook you with you deserve rest, because you do. If I can't hook you with you deserve to feel okay, because you do. I'll hook the part of you that has a heart for children. And you may have seen this quote, maybe you've seen part of it, because the first part of it goes around the internet a lot, but not the bottom one. I'm going to use like kind of TJ dumbed down language, because to me it just makes more sense. At the top, dysregulated just means like I'm jacked up, I'm not being my best self today. Maybe my level of stress is up through the roof. So if I'm jacked up and I come into my classroom, I come into my building, and little Sally comes in, and maybe Sally had a bad night's sleep. Maybe Sally just had a big argument with her mom or her dad, who knows. But Sally comes in and she's also at a heightened level of stress. I can't help her get out of that brain state. I can't help her get to a place to where she is calm and safe and connected and ready to learn. I can't. But here's the dangerous part, and we miss it. If I'm all jacked up and I come into my classroom and I bring all that stuff in with me, and little Sally's, she got a good night's sleep, she ate her breakfast, she comes in, she's safe, she's connected, she's ready to learn, I can pull her right down with me, and I probably will. Because if you've ever learned about brain states, where we're walking around in, the brain state that I'm living in, my kids are not going to be in a higher level brain state than me. And there's research out there to show that really kids are going to reach a level of attunement and co-dysregulation with the adult that is leading them. And that's going to lead to, number one, I'm not feeling good, they're not feeling good, but ultimately, we're not getting anything done in the classroom. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen that. Maybe you just got some new language to put with it. But another part of taking care of myself is confronting my own biases. Now, my friend, Dr. Edward Anderson, who is the director of On Track Greenville, I love how he puts it really simply and says that educational bias means that one group of students is not treated the same as another. We all have biases. My friend, soon to be Dr. Jessica Sharp at Sharp Brain Consulting, she says that if we have bias, it means we have a working brain. It is one of the most basic things that we can do. It's a normal brain function. So doing best by yourself and doing best by your students, learn about it. Confront your own biases, because we can't control that we have them, but we can control how much they control our actions. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to my website, look at resources. There's some things to watch, listen to, read, or look up Sharp Brain Consulting, look up Renewed Harmony, and hopefully Todd can put these in the chat. And Nika White Consulting. Those are 3 groups right here in South Carolina, all over the state, that are excellent when it comes to bias. Now I'm about to show you a few quotes to give some credence to some of the things that I'm going to say, and they all come directly from students that I've worked with. But I also want to throw in this caveat, because I am a trained therapist, and I know I have some colleagues in the room who are also therapists, counselors. If you're not, don't feel like you have to be. In this movement of trauma-informed care, sometimes implicitly, sometimes explicitly, teachers are asked and expected to be therapists. And I want to take that off of your shoulders, because you not only should you not be expected to, you can't. So you don't need to do or know a child's entire trauma history to do this work. The more we learn about trauma and what it does to somebody, the more we're actually realizing someone doesn't actually have to unpack that history to heal. You really don't have to. And I'm going to give you some strategies that you can do for all kids to help them be more resilient. And guess what? If you have some in your classroom who have experienced trauma, even better. You're going to be doing right by them too. This was a quote from a high school student that I was working with. And it goes to show you the level of trust some students have walking into our buildings. And why do I show you this quote? A lot of us, and maybe you've said it, maybe you've heard it, it's easy to say, I mean, you just got to trust me. Be careful with that sentence. A lot of our students have suffered what we call complex trauma. It's repeated trauma, suffered at the hands of people that they're supposed to be protected by, that are supposed to love them, like this young girl right here. I'm gonna give you some new language. So something I use when I'm working with someone new, especially if I sense that they've had some trauma, is I don't expect you to trust me, but I'm gonna ask a favor. If you would, just watch me and give me the opportunity to earn your trust. Now here's the kicker. Then you take the onus. You have to show up. You have to be the adult. You have to be the professional, and you have to be somebody that deserves trust. This is another student that I worked with a while back. I was visiting him in juvenile detention center. He was arrested for runaway because his mother kicked him out of the house. Now, how does this relate to resilience? I know there's a lot of talk about issues around how do we best serve our students who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transsexual, transgender. I'm not going to get deep into this, but I will tell you one thing, because I know we can all maybe have our different views, but I know none of us want students to die by suicide. Calling a student by the name that they prefer is suicide prevention. Using the pronouns that they prefer is suicide prevention. It is resilience building. And if you're sitting there and you're feeling, pay attention to the vibe. So if you're feeling some resistance right now over that statement, I have a question. Did you feel any resistance from me calling myself TJ? Because Terry is my given name. And I've never had any resistance on all my IDs, on all that stuff. It's people calling me TJ. So simply just honoring folks and accepting them for who they are. Because ultimately I say all that to say safety comes first. So students have to feel safe, both physically and physiologically. Say that again. Without safety, we're not getting anything done. So think about some of the things that you can do to cultivate safety. Number one is simply consistency. Is your room consistent? All of us have rooms that look differently, but do I know what I'm going to experience when I show up in your room? Do I know when I'm going to experience when I experience you? Are you consistent? And this, honestly, this goes back to taking care of yourself, making sure that you are showing up at your best self as much as you can. Because the brain responds and reacts to things that it experiences over and over and over and over and over. So think about who that is for you. Okay. So your environment should be neat. It should be clean. It should be orderly. It might be minimalistic and it might have stuff all over the room, but it should be consistent. Okay. And I also think about like what students are experiencing when they walk in your building. That's a really good experiment. If you can get to your school early, if you don't already, go and post up where the kids walk in the door and see what they're greeted with or who they are greeted with. Because I'll tell you this, a lot of the schools that I've seen across the state, the first thing is an adult yelling at them with an aggressive tone, an accusatory tone about something as trivial as dress code or an ID. Maybe the situation itself isn't trivial. Maybe at some point we need to have a conversation about ID. But is that how you want to greet somebody? Make sure that students feel safe. Now, this is one you can throw in the chat if you want. I would love to read these answers. I've never asked this question in a training. But when you were in the 5th grade, if I came to you and said you can have one wish, what do you think you might have wished for? Answer is 5th grade you. Because I think mine would be unlimited video game rentals from Blockbuster. Now, if there's some young folks in the crowd, you might not know what Blockbuster is, but it would have probably been unlimited video game rentals from Blockbuster or maybe a trip to Disney World. One elementary school student I was working with a few years back, I asked this student that same question, and this was their response. 5th grade student, 10 years old, one wish. The most selfish thing that this kid asked for was, can I have 2 to provide food and housing to my household? Now think about that. That's a 10-year-old that's walking around with that on their mind all day. How much learning do you think's happening? How much internal growth do you think's happening? So another thing that we can do to help build resilience is help students have their basic needs met. This goes back to systems. You can work on this from a state level advocacy point because what we can provide in social service agencies comes from the funding at our state house. But also get to know the folks at your building who work on this. Maybe that's your school social worker, counselor. Maybe I don't know. We all have different folks at our buildings. Maybe you can work with somebody to know like, hey, if I have a parent that reaches out to me because they need anything from a book bag, pencils for their kids to food or housing, they may trust you and not trust somebody else. So maybe you have a list of resources that you could just, empower them with. Meeting their basic needs can help build resiliency. I mentioned earlier about students need to feel accepted. Are you really asking your students who they are? Another question I like to ask kids is, how do you know if an adult in your building cares for you? And one of the most common answers I get is they ask me about things that have nothing to do with school. So I would encourage you to carve out time, even if you're not a classroom teacher, whatever your role is, to simply ask kids, how are you? What are some things you like to do in your spare time? Ask them about their family. Imagine whatever kid you've had the best relationship with that you've ever had. Think about the things you would ask them with and then apply that to all the students in your classroom. Because after safety, if we're moving up brain states, trying to get to an optimal level of arousal, an optimal level of ready to learn, healthy and ready to learn, that second level intervention, if you will, that second level basic human need is connection. So think about people in your building you're connected with. Like I know the folks when I'm connected with, my Biology changes when I get around them. I smile. There's all these happy chemicals that are released in our brains that make us feel good. And it's actually good for our physical health to be connected with folks. So a tier one strategy in your building, and if you don't use MTSS language in your school, when I say tier one, it's something we do for all kids. We need to make sure that all students in the building feel connected to at least one adult. And that needs to be both ways. The student and the relationship need to feel a mutual connection. And then the students need to be connected with each other. There's so many practices that we can do on an intentional basis, like classroom circles. Some people call it restorative practices. There's all kinds of different things. If you follow Edutopia, which let's throw that one in the chat, Edutopia, it's a great website. Fantastic website with all kinds of strategies that you can use in the school for connection. I saw another one on there that was called 2 by 10, where you pick one student for 10 days, spend 2 minutes with them talking about whatever they want. Make sure that your kids feel connected. Connection is really the key to safety and or to attachment, which builds a foundation for how we experience the entire world. The entire world. Now, a lot of you are probably waiting on this part because I definitely have the reputation of being the touchy-feely, therapist, but also where we miss it sometimes in the conversation around trauma-informed care is almost being too touchy-feely, too light with our expectations. And if we get too hung up on what kids have gone through and what they have experienced, we can fall into the world of pity. And Zaretta Hammond, who I'm going to quote later, and Benita Love, they both talk about how dangerous and insidious that is when we are working with historically underserved students and we let our expectations fall. It can turn into a conversation like this. This was the student I was working with who was right at the verge of dropping out. You know, as a therapist, we talk often a lot about factors that can influence if somebody's going to do well in therapy. The number one is the relationship that I have with that client, because it's the foundation of all the trust that we build, and everything builds off that. But also, it's, do I believe that they're going to succeed? Because that is going to drive everything I do. It's going to drive how much effort I put in, and it's a palpable thing that you can experience. So I want you to really, really search yourself with every student. Do you really think they can succeed? Because if you do, I promise it's going to change. It will affect the way that you teach them. So we have to maintain high expectations. Kids are going to rise to the level that we believe they can rise to. So one thing that I like when I'm working with somebody new is I like to help them get a win right off the bat. Let's find something like a small task that I know you can get some win and build some momentum. So, it's like my mentee, he loves to play basketball, and he thinks he's Steph Curry. He's not Steph Curry. Nobody's Steph Curry but Steph Curry, who is an all-star basketball player. So he likes to shoot from like way out here, and I'm like, hey, bud, let's shoot a layup first. Let's just see the ball go in the net. So think about, with your students, what does that look like? Maybe that looks like just helping them get one answer right. Maybe that helps them, it looks like giving them a small task that they can do to help you with, and just something they're going to hit a home run with, and then be over the moon about it. Help them build that self-esteem, that internal locus of control. If you've never heard that term, internal locus of control means that I believe that I have a say in my destiny. If I have an external locus of control, it basically means that the world is going to decide my fate. I don't have this quote up there, but I remember working with a student who in 7th grade was getting put out of school by an SRO in handcuffs. And he made the statement, and I'll never forget it. I mean, I had to go to jail sometime. 7th grade. He had a very strong external locus of control. By giving them wins, by helping them build their self-esteem, we can change that. We can build that internal. Zaretta Hammond, I mentioned Zaretta Hammond's work earlier. This QR code will actually take you straight to that book. I threw it on there. It's called Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain. And she gives some really good concrete interventions that you can do at the classroom level. And this is one, to make your feedback instructive and corrective. You know, in therapy, we use I statements a lot and affective statements. And this can look, even in a positive, this can be the difference in saying, good job. And I really love the effort that I saw you putting in on that math test this week. I can tell why you passed. So much more detail and instructive. But you can also use that when they're corrective. Make sure that you're honoring the work that they're putting in, but helping them know exactly where they need to put in the work. And then be there to help when needed, right? We want to give them high expectations and support when they need it. I'm going to show this quick video because to me, I was watching this documentary a while back and I've never seen anything like kind of everything that I just talked about embodied in a short interaction. This fellow right here that you see is named Stephon Marbury. He was an NBA player. He's retired now. And he's back home in Coney Island, where he's from. And he's talking to a kid in a barbershop. And I want you to just notice what you notice.
You met? Yes. You said you're going to go to the NBA?
Me?
Yeah.
Gotta go up.
How you going to get there?
I'm gonna drive.
You going to drive?
I'll take a train.
Where you going to take the train to?
To NBA.
Do you know how to play?
You gotta put the ball between your legs, but then you toss it and turn around and
No.
shoot it in the hoop.
No. The first place you put the ball is in the hole. But you don't have to play basketball. You could be the president of the United States. Nobody never told you that?
What?
That you could be the president of the United States. If you're the president of the United States, that means you can help all of the people in Coney Island.
Nobody told me that.
I know. This is America.
I would love to be able to process with all of you, and I hope you noticed what we would call cognitive dissonance. I hope you saw those wheels turning in that little boy's brain when all of a sudden he realized, wait, I can do what? Nobody ever told me that. We work with those little boys and girls every day who have never really been told what's out there. And I want you to think, if you grew up like I did, I love my mother. She raised me in a way that I grew up thinking I truly could do anything I put my mind to, except go to the NBA. I'm 5'7". But if that was you, think about how hard it would be if that wasn't. Try to put on some empathy for just a minute and imagine if whenever you thought about something you want to do, really in your heart and your soul and your gut, not thinking you really could achieve it. Not thinking that's for me. A lot of the kids we're working with feel that way. A lot of historically underserved students, a lot of our black students, a lot of our Hispanic students, a lot of little girls grow up feeling, because of the systems that they are forced to deal with every day, that this world, this country, this life is not for them. And they have that external locus of control that we can we can have a say in changing, or at least affecting. Resilience manifests both individually and collectively. Often, resilience is expressed communally by a group, family, organization, or culture. I referenced this book in the very beginning, My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem, who is another one of my professional heroes. I highly, highly recommend. If you haven't read this book, put it on your reading list. Don't expect to read this book in a week. It's not one of those you breeze through. This book is very hard work. Very hard work. If you read it in a week, you haven't done it right. But in this book, he talks about generational and racial trauma, how groups experience things communally and collectively, and also what it's going to take for us to heal from that, and how it's not something that we do, because trauma very rarely happens in a vacuum. It's a lot of times the worst kinds of trauma especially happen in the context of relationships. I don't even want to say a silver lining. The flip side of that is that it's often healed the best through relationships. We can start that relationship building before anything maybe even happens. We cannot raise a child in a world, in a society where nothing bad ever happens to them. It's impossible. But we can help put in those little therapeutic moments, those therapeutic doses, that relationship equity that will help build that internal resilience, so that when kids are hit with those traumas, adversities, microaggressions, whatever they are, however they're coming, that maybe they can just keep it moving. Maybe they can acknowledge that this thing is hard, but know that, you know what, I can get through this. We're not done. I don't like to end on a contact slide, because I don't want to leave you with that. This presentation isn't about me. It's about we. It's about us. If you want to learn more about my work or connect more, take a picture of this right now, or that QR code will take you to my website. Sit it to the side. One more thing, because I love you all and I want to give back, I'm giving back what I got from this. I'm going to turn it right into Amazon gift cards. So if you want to be entered into a drawing, scan that. I'm going to leave it up for a minute, and I think Todd's putting the link into the chat if you would rather do it on your computer. But if you enter it, you can put in your email. You'll go on the email list. But I'm going to give away 2 or 3 Amazon gift cards in probably a week. I'll do it on my Instagram. If you're not on Instagram, don't worry. I'll email you with the email that you gave. But I want to end on this note. You see my hat. It says we. Again, Dr. Perry. He says the collective we of a community heals, that we are all healers. And in that book that I referenced at the beginning, What Happened to You, Dr. Perry does something that's really brave, because he's a therapist as well. And I agree with him on what he says. And he says that if he could choose intervention-wise, if he could choose between someone having access to a top-notch therapist or a therapeutic web, a group of people in that person's life that throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout their lives are providing moments of healing, moments of connection, moments of safety, that he would take that all day long. And I agree. I've seen it. I know the power of healing that we can do when we do this work together. I know that if you showed up to this, you believe in that too. And I'm excited to hear what you got from this. I'm excited, and I hope you will connect with me on social media or some platform and let me know what you are doing, or what you plan to do, what you're committing to do to be more of a change agent, to be more of a healing agent, and to build resilience in the students that you serve. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to hearing more.
All right. Thank you so much, TJ. Really, a lot of great insights there. A lot of things that I'm still chewing on and will continue to chew on for days. Before I let you go, I did want to, I don't know how comfortable you are talking about this. And if you're not, it's fine. I know you just a couple months ago in your district experienced a real tragic situation with the loss of a student, and I'm sure that this has made that work all the more important and all the more just like kind of right in your face. When we talk about healing, we talk about resilience. Can you talk to educators who maybe not necessarily even those in that district, but just educators around the state who are seeing this in the news and trying to process it, and maybe some words of advice to educators and to maybe legislators about how we can prevent that from happening again?
Yeah, that is a hard one, Todd, because I don't know who's listening, and I don't want to bring up something in somebody that they weren't expecting to process tonight. But what I will say is I'll speak more generally. When we go through something hard as a group, especially like a one-time event, there's a difference in extended complex trauma that somebody may experience, especially as a child, versus a single event trauma, as we would call it. But what I would say is, if you've been through something hard, maybe you've experienced a single event trauma, or shared something like that with colleagues, with friends, with family members, or a small group, or whatever that may be, is there's no like direct linear path towards what we would call being healed. It's hard. We are forever changed. We're not forever broken. Healing is possible. But I'll go back to something I just said. It's most effective when we do it together. Talking about things that we've experienced helps. Keeping it bottled up doesn't usually. But doing it at your own pace, being around people, and physical touch, if you're comfortable with that, finding people that you can really just commune with, and do that together. Now, everybody heals at a different rate, right? When people go through hard things, especially bigger groups, a lot of times some folks are going to get back to what we would call some state of normal. They're going to adjust a little bit more quickly. And I think some of us, sometimes if I'm the one that doesn't, it's easy to think, oh, something's wrong with me. And that's not the case either. So what I would encourage anybody that's listening to this, even if you're not in South Carolina, if that's something that you've experienced, I would encourage you to know that one of my favorite definitions of trauma is that it is a very normal biological response to a very abnormal thing that you just went through. So whatever you're experiencing, it's ultimately your body trying to keep you safe and keep you alive. And get the help that you feel like you need. There's no shame in that. It's actually brave and courageous to get the help that you feel like you might need.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I was going to mention that I think this is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I just want to put that out there. I know you do therapy, and with clients, and I'm in therapy. I've been in therapy throughout most of my adult life, in and out during different times that I've struggled with different things. And I think we need to normalize that, and educators in particular, and people in working in schools. It's a lot. We've been through a lot, and I want to just really highly recommend therapy as a means of building that resilience in that way that you were mentioning about getting that help and getting that consistent sort of support that you need to work through the stressful situations, even if it's like people are telling you why you find that so stressful, like just the normal day-to-day stuff that teachers have been dealing with, just the workload and that kind of thing. If that's stressful, finding that support, finding a good therapist in your area, to connect with, you're right. It's not going to, for me, it's never been like a one-time deal. You go in and, it's not, you're inoculated and you're done. It's like, it's a process of really kind of figuring out. For me, it's been a process of figuring out, connecting how my thoughts are creating a lot of my own sort of misery, because I'm habituated to not challenging certain thoughts. Yeah. So it's been really, but it's been a hard process. It's like I'm having to undo a lot of lifetime habits and wiring. So maybe you want to have comments about the importance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so true, and I love how it's not a one-time process. I've had 5 therapists in my life. 4 were great. The first one was horrible. I mean, honestly, he was one of the reasons I wanted to do this work, because I'm like, there's a better way. But the next 4 were fantastic. Each one was perfect for where I was at that point in my life. Some were more just needed to refer me to books to read, and some really had, like the last one, we really dug into some hard stuff. Yeah. So that's another thing I would say, if you're on this call and maybe you're on the fence about starting, the hardest part is getting started, and I would encourage you to take it slow in the sense of get the right person.
Yes.
All of us are different. So if the first person you meet with, the first therapist you have a consultation with, if you're like, this isn't a fit, they're not going to be upset if you say that, and just keep trying some folks until you find somebody that just fits just like that perfect shoe. I mean, you're going to know, you're going to feel safe, and you're going to feel connected, and that's the person you're going to make some work with.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll say too is, if you're going to go to therapy, be ready to come and be honest with your therapist. If you find your therapist, you're not going to get anything. You're not really going to get anywhere. You have to be willing to be vulnerable and share those parts of yourself, and be really honest with them about things. So, but TJ, I just want to thank you for your light and and the positivity. I love your shirt. I need you to send me an email about where you got it. Because that's really what this is all about, is providing hope, replacing bad ideas with better ones, trying to mitigate, the violence and the hatred that we see in the world, that we see so much of it, Buffalo this past week, trying to replace that with love and compassion and kindness. And every time we can have a conversation like this, and we can share good information about how people can find that peace and can find that resilience and spread that. I think that we need to take every opportunity to do that. So thank you for the work that you do in Greenville, and for sharing your insights tonight. And I just want to remind everybody that you can go to the website for this new Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. It's CEWL. It's cool.us, CEWL.us. We will post this video within the next few days, within the next few business days. I'll have this recording posted to that website, so people can watch it, share it, and go back over all the information. I did try to link everything, but I may have missed a few things. But I got a couple of the books and websites and things linked. But and I also want to remind everybody that this is being brought to you by the South Carolina Education Association. If you're interested in joining, if you're not a member, you can go to jointhescea.org and join us to help build a movement to make our schools the kind of places that our educators and their students deserve. So, any final thoughts before we head out, TJ?
No, I just encourage everybody, as cliche as this is, this summer, if you're not working, do something that brings you a whole lot of joy, and don't feel bad about just taking it easy. It's been a hard year.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, TJ. And I will see you at the latest June 28th.
Right.
And you have a wonderful month wrapping up your school year. And if there's anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Same. Thank you.
All right, TJ, take care. And good night, everybody.